Hey, so I want to accomplish just really two things with this panel. And I think until John comes in and tells us we can't ask questions, you are allowed to ask questions at any point during this panel. But anyway, my name's Scott Kurzer. I'm a columnist for the Boston Globe. I cover startups and new technology and venture capital. I also am editor of a website called Innovation Leader that's looking at innovation inside big companies. I want to do real brief introductions of these panelists and just kind of ask two questions. Like one, let's talk a little bit about what's happening. You describe the AR community in Boston today. And two, like what could we do if we wanted to pour some gasoline on the campfire and get more stuff happening? And so why don't we go down the line, just quick, like 30-second or less introduction.
Great, sure. So hi, I'm Matt Hirsch. I'm the CTO of a company here called Lumi. So we're actually a Mass Challenge grad, and we are now in the Autodesk build space, still down in the Seaport. So because a 3D picture is worth, I don't know, what, 3,000 words? So I'm going to show a little super quick demo about the kind of things we can do. So this, I don't know, hopefully I'm not reflecting the lights there, but this is a 3D print, and this is what our company makes. So basically, you send us your 3D data, and we use standard printers to make something awesome and attention-grabbing. And so we're kind of on the periphery of AR, and I'd love to hear your feedback on the kind of stuff we're doing, and we have a demo out there. So come talk to me, and I'll be happy to answer questions up here too.
All right, Alki.
Hi everyone, my name is Alki. I'm an interaction designer. I work for Building Conversation, and we're neighbors. So with Matt in Autodesk called Build Space, we're working on this app that's basically geolocating 3D models in context and in full space, so you can walk around your mobile devices and experience something in AR. And I had a background in architecture, but I got more into VR, AR, in my master's in design technology. And I've been very lucky to work for 2 AR startup companies here in Boston. So, yeah.
What was the one prior to Building Conversations?
Pivot the World. It's a company that does, basically you can see in AR, let's say memories of the spaces, so you can see old pictures of how the space used to be, historic locations, and we've actually worked on the Harvard official mobile tour, which is in AR, which is great to have something, that much into augmented reality starting here in Boston. So yeah, check it out if you go to Harvard.
So that's in the App Store now, the Pivot the World Harvard AR
official
tour.
mobile tour.
Harvard official mobile tour. All right, cool. Neil.
All right, thank you. Hi everyone, my name's Neil Gupta. I'm the founder of Boston AR. It's started as a meetup group, and it's now registered as a 501c3 nonprofit. The goal of the group is to grow the augmented reality ecosystem in Boston and Massachusetts. And whether that means bringing awareness, interest, education, and ideation to consumers who then want these applications, whether it's bringing that same interest and education to businesses who then ask for these solutions, or educating entrepreneurs and software developers to create these solutions, all of those are relevant and necessary to create an ecosystem. And what I'm also trying to do with the group, and I kind of violated my own ethos here, is it's not just for developers, right? For augmented reality, developers are key, but you also need designers. You need folks who understand the business needs and challenges. You need everyone at the same table, and that's a pretty rare thing. That's what we try to do with Boston AR, is bring these different people together to brainstorm on what they could do, and then inspire them by, at each meetup, we show, here's how people are doing things with AR, or here's how you can think about it differently, whether it's design thinking or actually applying it to the utility space or anywhere in between.
Neil, are you just a meetup or a nonprofit CEO now, or are you also doing a startup?
So right now, I am effectively a nonprofit CEO. I do independent consulting on the side. I work with some companies that are looking to embrace the Internet of Things and change from pure products to services. And I also help some investors look at VR, AR, IoT deals to look at the strength of the team, the strength of the idea, the strength of the market. Before this, as of 2 months ago, I was at Draper Labs. I'd been there for just shy of 7 years. In my last 2 years at Draper, I helped create their new innovation office called the Assembler Office. My job as the outreach lead was to understand the innovation ecosystem in the Boston and Cambridge area, to understand the incubators, accelerators, entrepreneurs, and what was missing from that ecosystem. So once Draper created the Assembler Office and I felt, okay, this is now here and ready to go, I wanted a new challenge, which is why I started Boston AR.
All right, cool. And so let me just, like I said, only really 2 things that I want to achieve in this very short panel. One is, let's talk about Boston today in AR. I mean, I would toss out and say, like, man, I don't think there's significant hardware makers in Boston. I don't think there's a lot of significant AR investors in Boston, but like we do have a lot of people in academia and in the startup world that are saying, let's develop some AR applications or software. Does anyone want to push back on that or describe it differently? Maybe more of a glass half full perspective?
I feel like from the student community, because I've left from student quite recently, I've seen it in a very positive way because people have been involved in projects either a little bit or more. So even if you hear from your friend that are doing something in AR, you want to dive into it. And I think that a key component to having AR communities develop is that feeling of the community being together. And it has been mentioned a lot of times, but I'm going to go back to Pokemon Go and say how like it exploded suddenly because people were sharing things on social media, and they had this first experience of actually taking a picture with something that was imposed in the real life and sharing that. And I feel like exactly because people have this feeling of sharing, there's this opportunity to start things here in a very tech-cultured city. So it's a community that actually brings out what could develop here in Boston.
Yeah, Matt, you want to jump in?
Yeah, well, I guess, I thought I would answer not exactly the question you asked, but a slightly different one, which is, if you're founding a business in Boston, not just AR, like what are the resources, that are available? And I think one of the things that was really awesome for us, just, we were about 1.5 years old at this point. At the very beginning of our journey through this company, we had the opportunity to be out in California, and we thought really hard about it. The three of us, the founders, were all MIT grads. We have a great network here. And we actually, right around the time we were trying to decide, found out that we were accepted in Mass Challenge. So we said, you know what, let's give it a shot. We'll stay in Boston. And it's worked out great for us. I mean, we're still a very small company, but the amount of funding available in Boston is actually, like for Series A size things, is quite competitive with a lot of the other major investment cities. It's something where if you look at, you're doing like a Series C, yeah, you probably want to be in San Francisco. But we've also found a huge amount of resources available just in this community. That like Mass Challenge, we found we're actually in the Autodesk build space.
Yeah.
And we found that there's quite a bit of stuff for an early startup to really start to get some traction.
But I don't know, like on the funding thing, I guess I would say, what is an AR startup in Boston that has gotten beyond the 10,000, 20, like real significant funding in a round that, you could talk about millions of dollars rather than hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
Does anyone pop to mind?
Not an expert in
Neil?
AR.
So two things. To directly answer that question, I don't know of, and I would love to be wrong, but I don't necessarily know of any kind of like specifically AR experience that came out of Boston that has then raised a lot of money. There are investors in Boston who are looking to invest in the VR and AR space, but I think there's sort of, if I can go back to the seedier question, which was, how come there aren't investors or how come there aren't people building AR applications? I think that's maybe not the best approach to think about it. It's more of how come people aren't creating really lucrative solutions to business problems that are using augmented reality as the base. If you go out and say, hey, who's doing AR that I can invest in, there's so many either applications that are not meant to be profit-making, or the ones that do make profit don't fit VC mechanics, that it doesn't make sense to receive investment. So if you are developing on Epson glasses to increase productivity of enterprise workers, you don't necessarily need VC funding. What you need are initial, maybe another chair, what you need are initial customers who can actually give you sustainability.
Everybody, big round of applause for Sarah Downey from Accomplice. Yeah, no, we got started early. We were going to take some extra airtime. We were going to make everybody think that this conference was actually like, running on rails. But, Sarah, I actually have to say, I've had panelists leave in the middle of a panel, and this is much better to have a panelist join in the middle of a panel.
It's the opposite of a smoke bomb, right?
Right.
So this is actually good timing. Maybe Sarah will say Neil was wrong in everything he just said, which is that I don't know that just to summarize it, that there are ideas that are really investments for VCs in the AR, VR space, specifically in Boston. There are really interesting applications. There are cool ideas that will make a small company, but I don't know that the next billion-dollar company in AR has been identified in Boston.
Is this thing on? Can you hear me out there? Yeah. Oh, okay. Technology. I agree. I am super into AR and VR, like as a human, as an investor generally, but I'm relatively new as an investor, and I think that AR is several years away from its best stuff, and I think I too am several years away from my best stuff. So it's almost good for me because I can write checks right now, but I'm trying to start out slower. And I think, yeah, there's some interesting stuff. There's the seeds of things that are interesting. I do think I am bullish on Boston as a city that can be big for VR and AR. Like we have MIT here, we have HBS here, we have this like semiconductor background in the city. So I think there can be a lot of big stuff. But you're right, the $1 billion thing. We see a lot of pretty good ideas, but not the $1 billion idea. And we have our own investors. Like there's this value chain of money. A lot of people don't know that. And like when I worked in startups, I was like, who are these VCs? Where do they get this money? We have to pay our own investors back, so we can't do these things that won't return the fund. And I haven't seen much that would.
Well, I mean, there are two interesting stories about about VC in this space. One is that Matrix Partners and Spark Capital did invest in Oculus and did really well financially, but while they're both Boston, Cambridge firms, didn't really result in a lot of Oculus, headcount here in the Boston area. And then I think Matrix and Northbridge were really close to investing in Magic Leap before Magic Leap did the giant funding round with Google. And so their plan was, hey, let's invest in this Florida company and tell them to do their, come to Boston and start hiring engineers here rather than, Boca Raton, Florida, home of the esteemed Florida Atlantic University. So the other thing I wanted to touch on in this panel is just what should we be doing to kind of pour more fuel on the fire of AR in Boston, given that it may be hard to get, unless John can get Meta to move, all their engineers here, or start hiring engineers here, or Microsoft starts doing some HoloLens stuff here. What are the things we could control and sort of do better?
Scott, the chief scientist of Amazon is here. The chief scientist of HoloLens is here today.
Yeah.
We have 3 employees of Magic Leap.
Yeah. So okay, John's suggestion is we lock the doors of the media lab. And just order some pizzas for the next couple of years.
Well, maybe I can take a stab at that.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things I've been thinking about a lot, as someone who's doing something that's a little bit on like the periphery of what we would normally consider AR, is that the sort of ecosystem that you have in Boston is definitely not one that's going to launch a $1 billion consumer-facing electronics device, right? And I think that in thinking about how we can encourage people that are in this proximity of this space in Boston, I think it's a lot about thinking a little more expansively about what we mean by AR. And so, I mean, for me personally, thinking about why.
You guys are kind of an optics company broadly, right? Not an AR company specifically.
Yeah, in a sense. But I think what's important about AR is really breaking down the barriers of accessing information. Like I want to understand the world visually and impactfully immediately when I put on a headset, when I pick up my phone or tablet. And even for what we're doing, I think a lot of the story is about how do you get information off of a poster or a video screen really quickly and into someone's head. And so for us, this is really an awesome thing to be doing in optics, because I would say that this company we're doing is probably the first completely software-based optics company. Mm-hmm. So we compute our optics and print them on an inkjet printer. And I think that's the kind of thing that Boston can do. It's think so far outside the box that there's no one else even in this space. And that's something that actually we do have the tools to support in the city. We have lots of resources, like I was mentioning, Mass Challenge and some of the incubators we were looking at, that focus on these kind of off-the-wall ideas that come out of all the great schools here and giving them a home. So that's my take on it.
I'm curious, Sarah, since you joined us a little bit late, ideas about turning up the volume here in Boston and sort of spurring more AR activity.
So I think people like Neil doing the AR meetup, and there's a really active Boston VR meetup, are great hackathons. A lot of things are coming out of there. I agree with your statement on we can do this, but sort of through the periphery. I don't think it's going to be sexy. It's not going to be the next Vive, but I think there's a lot of like big data analytics and hardware that we do here that can be applied to AR. Like we led the Series A recently in this company called Vesper, which makes MEMS microphones. So they're micro electromechanical microphones, little tiny things that are in all of our phones and all of our devices. And that's going to be a really important thing for AR headsets because voice interfaces are super important for controlling this thing that often doesn't have controllers, and that we're figuring all these interface rules now. So like that's a company that it's a bunch of semiconductor people. It's like the heart of what Boston does. You wouldn't necessarily think AR, but that's one of their big targets.
Awesome. John, I heard that we're allowed to take questions from the audience, so I'd love to hear some. There's an actual participant in row 3 who has a question, then we'll come to you. Yeah, go ahead. Chris is bringing the microphone to you.
Thanks. So it's interesting. Back in 2006, right? So Micro Optical did raise $11.5 million to become a augmented reality company back before augmented reality really had a purpose, right? And their whole thing was hooking their MyView up to a portable DVD player, so things hadn't really evolved. But
even before that, they were talking about like utility line workers having headsets.
Invested $3 million in those guys, and then they were powered by Kopin, another Massachusetts startup who came this close to being the display in Google Glass before Google picked IMAX over them, and that's a pretty massive company. And was I wrong on that?
Yeah, this is a knowledgeable audience here. Yeah,
It's been disclosed a $24 million investment in Boston as well, and already a public company. We are an investor in Recon, and we're an investor in music. So.
Right.
Wait, sorry, Kopin just got a $24 million investment. You're saying?
Right.
All right.
Are you guys from
We didn't
Kopin?
announce it, but it wasn't picked up in the globe.
Right.
You did announce it.
Well, we're saying, so Kopin's an awesome Massachusetts company. That wasn't, again, these are guys who raised, who became big companies. They do a tremendous amount of work in the military now. So what am I saying? So there has been some interesting hardware things that just sort of seem to peter out. Nesbitt Haygood started Pixtronics out of here, MEMS-based displays, which could have been a great low-power VR kind of thing. Sold to Qualcomm for almost $300 million or something like that. And you might know Mike Klug did Zebra Imaging, so another sort of 3D thing. So there is some interesting optics stuff going on. You just have to sort of look for it, a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't supposed to divulge it from up here, but on Sunday, there's going to be a special section of the Globe devoted to the AFC Championship game, and then there's also a special section devoted to this $24 million investment in Kopin. So pretend you didn't hear that. Yeah, John.
So you guys, I'm really excited about this panel. I think Boston has some competitive advantages that people don't realize, and I think Silicon Valley, you hear a lot about it. I think it can be an echo chamber. And I think given that where we are with AR, there's opportunities for Boston to lead on design and health and medicine and manufacturing in AR, especially with GE moving here and all the health stuff. I'm curious, what do you see as Boston's competitive advantage right now to lead here? And you see in robotics and biotech, if you're starting a company, this is a place you got to move. If you're starting a company in AR, Boston ain't the place. And how can we change that, and how can we use the competitive advantage for other spaces to apply to AR?
Well, I'm going to buy you guys like 30 seconds to think and say, like, I think just, you sort of alluded to in the question, like just saying healthcare and AR, how long could you play out that thread of like how are doctors and nurses and patients going to be using AR, when they navigate Longwood or Mass General?
Daniel Kraft, I don't know if anyone here Daniel Kraft this morning. I mean, if you want to start a business, those are like best odds opportunities in health. I mean, there are a lot of good ideas out there.
So I think you could play out that thread for a long time. And then I feel like in general, it's like Boston's ability to find business customers for technologies, whether it's Fidelity thinking about AR and finance, or all kinds of other enterprise Fortune 500 companies. Anyone else want to take a crack at that, Neil?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So I think again, I'm going to go back to this idea of we don't talk about the smartphones the same way that we're talking about AR right now, but we shouldn't think about AR as its own market. It's really a tool to augment other things. So it's, when you say, oh, what are we going to do for healthcare and AR? That's a healthcare solution. That's not an AR solution. It happens to use AR technology, but when you talk about building an ecosystem in Boston, I think it really comes down to businesses using solutions that implement augmented reality and Internet of Things technologies. When businesses start using those, then they're going to have a hunger and an appetite for more, deeper solutions. So if you're somewhere in the country and you want to create an AR solution, you need a customer. If they're in Boston, that's where you'll go. So that's how we create an ecosystem, is you have to create demand. And companies aren't going to say, oh, we really want HoloLens applications. They're going to say, we really want better revenue, or we really want bottom line impact. We really have business challenges that we need solutions for. Is it VR? Is it AR? Is it the Flintstones car? They don't really care what the technology is, right? It's more about, is there a solution? So yes, I do think that because of healthcare, education, manufacturing, we're very close to New York, so retail is very strong in Boston. And in general research. So we do have certain areas that are going to tie in with AR much more closely than other sort of verticals, but I think we should be focused on how we, to John's point, ride the success of those verticals to create an augmented reality ecosystem, as opposed to try to create AR solutions.
I agree totally, and I'm just to add quickly, like if we think of it as AR is going to be everything, and that's you're right, and I think we're all here today because we believe that, then I think some of the peripheral industries that are strong in Boston, like John mentioned robotics, like what is one of the major pieces of robotics is computer and machine vision. That's absolutely essential to AR. And so I think to me that answer is it's the talent is our strongest thing, the talent coming out of all of these amazing universities that we have here, like MIT, those are creating this next generation of people who are experts in things like machine vision that are going to be essential as you look at the platforms across AR in every industry.
All right, so the message I'm taking from this panel is there's nowhere to go but up if you're talking about AR in Boston. There's no sideways, there's no down, it's just going up. Thank you for being here so late in the day. The next panel looks like they're in the on-deck circle, so I'm going to turn things back over to Chris. Thank you to you guys for the questions, and please help me thank these panelists.
Thank you.